The deep sea has always brought forth tales of horrific beasts, the gruff, hushed whisperings of ancient sailors, and refined novels of men who shirk the ocean entirely due to some deep instinctual fear have all led to a similar consensus. The black depths of the ocean that know no light save the odd bioluminescence, winding and coiling in their natural currents, contain horrors entirely unknown and unknowable. It's all rather silly, isn't it? True, the beasts that swim and float serenely in their hidden, blind dances could inspire terror in even the most stalwart sailor, under the right conditions. Yet, by plunging through the watery veil and seeking knowledge of the sunless depths, the secrets of the ocean can be stripped bare. This allows for the mysticism to fall away, leaving no difference between so-called horrors of the sea and the familiar creatures of the land. I've always believed that this was the sacred duty of men of science, and when I finally joined their ranks in this year of 1956, I was elated. This sense of spirituality was a bit difficult to cling to in my current position, out testing foreign waters with every piece of equipment our fishing boat could carry. It was useful work, but I couldn't help wishing that something eventful would actually come of this. Would we find some new species, an undersea land formation, or even a lost secret of humanity? I could only hope. Alright, we're done collecting samples. Let's run some tests on these, see what there is to see. A sullen man called from the stern. If my memory serves me right, this was Sammy Desmond. The stubborn bugger spent his entire day in that businesslike mindset, always looking to finish the next task. Very well, let's get this over with, another voice called. That would be Lucy Goldstein. The self-proclaimed great prodigy had felt some need to leave her musty basement and come on this little expedition. I didn't know why, and she hadn't felt like sharing her reasons yet. I got the feeling that she didn't like me or Desmond very much. She was always full of innovative ideas, but all thumbs at putting them to use. That was where I came in. As leader of this team, I had to manage these two. Not only that, but I'd only be assigned to the most simple tasks, such as this, if I didn't come up with something meaningful and soon. My sense of pride simply wouldn't allow for that. With that indignant thought, I headed below deck to partake in the drudgery. As I was preparing to sleep that night, I noticed a strange light from the window. A deep red softly bled in through the glass. Just then, I felt a sudden drop, as if I were a few inches above my bed. I gasped and bolted upright. Looking out the window, I saw only the soft white glow of the moon. Nothing was wrong, so I must have been dreaming a second ago. I sat back down in my bed, then noticed a strange odor. What now? I muttered to myself, already dying to get back to sleep. Knowing it would only be a worse problem in the morning, I got up and tried to follow the scent. It seemed to be coming from Goldstein's quarters. A quick knock on the door and she came out. She wasn't the only thing that came out, though. As soon as she opened the door, a miasma of raw, oppressive stink overwhelmed me. I staggered back and swallowed the bile that had quickly risen in my throat. What madness had that woman concocted? Looking up, I saw that she was smiling at me. What's going on here? I choked out, slowly rising to my feet. Don't worry, boss. It's just a little personal experiment that I've been working on for a while. Nothing dangerous, though I can show you if you like. It seems to have gotten a little rancid. There was an unnatural amount of cheeriness in her voice. I was reluctant to draw any closer to the source of that unholy fetor, but I knew I couldn't allow it to continue existing. I'm not religious in the slightest, but even I can recognize such a thing as purely blasphemous. If left unchecked, it would surely spell the doom of our expedition. I nodded. Goldstein beckoned me into her quarters, and I followed. The small room was a chasm of darkness, even more dim than the rest of the ship. If my eyes weren't already adjusted to the night, I never would have been able to see. Goldstein must have put up a black curtain or something of the like. Her bed was a mess, and the floor was cluttered with various apparatus. The desk was the most notable feature of the room, as upon it lied the source of my malaise, which only increased upon witnessing the fell horror. From the throne of a metal pan, basking regally in the soft light of a desk lamp, a maddening sight assailed my senses. The vile thing was a bright orange lump of soft fluff, which disgusted me in every way imaginable. It reminded me of insulation, or bread mold that had gotten out of control. Wires and tubes were inserted into it, like the neurons and veins of a higher organism. Worse still, it seemed to have little eyes which followed me as I moved through the room. Looking closer, I thought I saw it writhe gently. Lucy Goldstein, what is this? I was unable to hold back the outburst. She perked up, almost bouncing with excitement. Whenever we had spoken in the past, she seemed aloof, as if she was just tired of my presence and wanted to leave as soon as possible. Seeing her like this was simultaneously relieving and unnerving. She raved about how this was a new form of fungus she had engineered that was genetically closer to an animal than a plant. It vaguely made sense to me, though the thought of it put a knot of dread in my gut. She noticed that I wasn't saying anything in response, and turned her head quizzically. I immediately assembled my thoughts, not wanting to miss the chance for open communication with her. Well, it certainly is impressive. Not something I would have come up with on my own, so I'll commend you for that. I'm not even sure how you would pull off such a thing. Still, it's noxious. I can't allow this awful stench to get me or Desmond sick, and that little bundle of joy seems like it's capable of more mischief than that. Something has to be done, so I'll propose a deal. I'll be open to suggestions on how I can help you out. We can take a little detour, stay a little longer in one spot, maybe fish out a certain thing or two. Just say the word. In exchange, I want you to keep that thing from causing any more trouble. Keep it from getting a little rancid, as you so eloquently put it, and don't do anything else that could endanger the safety of our expedition. Of course, should you reject this offer, I'll have to take matters into my own hands. So, what do you think? Lucy Goldstein stared at me from across the room, her face devoid of expression. Slowly, she walked over, her gaze unblinking. The intensity of her stare was almost as disconcerting as the horrific smell which still lingered, but I didn't let my composure break. If there is one thing I can do right, it's to remain steadfast in the face of opposition. Just then, she wrapped her arms around me. I was stunned. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind at once, and none of them made any sense. She spoke first, clearing the tension. Thank you. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. I've been so worried during this trip that I'd never be able to do anything meaningful, and that you'd reject my personal interests if you ever found out. I was wrong about you. You're far more reasonable than I thought you were. So, thank you. I felt tears soak into my shirt. I didn't know how to respond, so I just silently placed an arm around her. She looked up, her face still empty. It seems I got a little emotional there. I hope you didn't mind it too much. Oh well, I'll accept your deal, boss. One more thing, though. Don't tell Sammy. He's a nice guy, but he might get a little skittish if he learns what I'm doing. I'll ask for your help when I need it, and I expect you to keep your end of the bargain. Back to normal. I nodded, then left her quarters. I slept peacefully from then on. The next morning we ate breakfast together and got back to work. We've done all we can here. Let's go somewhere else, Desmond offered. Goldstein spoke up. I've studied our map and I believe that we should head about 10 miles east. Desmond scoffed. That's Russian territory. The second we go over there, they'll blow us out of the water. I don't know what you hope to achieve there, but I don't like our chances. Goldstein looked to me, waiting for a decision. I personally agreed with Desmond, but I'm a man of my word. Goldstein's right, I began. We already know what we'll find around here. How could we call ourselves scientists if we didn't explore the unknown? I finished, crossing my arms and closing my eyes. He got the message and piped down. We set sail 10 minutes later, and Goldstein was quite pleased when we arrived at the designated point. Desmond was dutifully tending to the usual drudgery, but she went off on her own to play with her sentient mold. I was tempted to join her, but I certainly didn't want to involve myself with her little abomination any longer, so I just went back to my quarters. It went well the first day. Goldstein was as apathetic as ever, though I sensed a little more enthusiasm as usual. I helped Desmond with his tasks. He was a bit sullen after my decision, but he didn't let it impact his duties in the slightest. Such a boring man. I would have almost preferred for him to show a little anger, a little indignance, a little anything. The key word was almost. He was still useful as he was. The second day was when everything fell apart. That morning I was peacefully eating my breakfast while watching the horizon. The sky was a vivid red. I thought I saw a dot on the surface of the sea, so I pulled out a telescope and looked closer, only to see everything I had feared in one massive package. The giant silver beast cut through the water as it charged straight toward us. Its claws were out, ready to strike, and the eyes at the top of its head glared down at us hatefully. At the very top of the warship, a Soviet banner flew proudly. Well then, I uttered under my breath, biting back a panicked shriek or a furious curse. My mind raced, wondering how we could get out of this situation. I raced below decks and grabbed the map and compass. I wrapped the compass in the map and ran with the parcel to the deck. Hoping that I wasn't dooming us all, I dropped them into the ocean. Goldstein! Desmond! Get out here! I screamed. They were out in seconds, and Desmond flipped out at the sight of the Russian ship. Goldstein kept her cool, but I could see in her eyes that she was as scared and pained as me. I racked my brain, trying to remember what few Russian words I knew. Da, niet. Nothing else came to me, and my heart skipped a beat when I finally realized just how doomed we were. One last thing came to mind. I pulled off my white overshirt and tied it to the flagpole, just in case. As I did, the ship pulled close to us. Soldiers aimed guns at us from the deck, and we all raised our hands. A rope ladder was lowered, and a handful of them climbed down onto our boat, including one well-dressed officer. He came up to the three of us while the rest of the boarders began searching the ship. His voice rang out, but I didn't understand a word he said. After a few sentences, he switched to English. Who are you? What are you doing here? These are Soviet waters. Why do you intrude? I considered my words carefully, then replied, We are scientists, researchers. We came to analyze the waters, but lost our navigational equipment. If these truly are Soviet waters, we must have drifted too far east overnight. You have my sincerest apologies. The officer analyzed me closely. I couldn't tell if he bought my bluff or not. He had a poker face stronger than that of the Easter Island heads. A soldier came out of the cabin and spoke to him. They exchanged conversation for a moment. Then the officer turned back to me. It is as you say, he admitted. I respect it. I am Captain Alexei Karamazov. Sorry, but you need to leave. You don't belong here. I will spare you once, not again. His English was somewhat rudimentary, but his message was as clear as glass. Understood, I noted. We'll follow the sun west at full speed. Thank you. Satisfied, he called to his soldiers, and they followed him back up the ladder. I looked at Goldstein and Desmond. Well, it's morning, so point the ship away from the sun and show me what that engine can do. The Russians were already pulling away. Desmond took the helm, and Goldstein came up to me.
Hello, boss. Do you think maybe we could take it a little slower? I can still get a little more out of this area.
That odd sort of joy was in her voice again. Oh no. Nope! I barked out, any sense of propriety gone. I choose the survival of this boat and everyone on board. You probably got some good stuff while it lasted, but I'm not about to incite an international incident and brave Russian gunfire just so you can stick another wire in your little slime puddle loaf thing. I'm sorry, but that decision is final. Goldstein froze, staring me down. She could play this little game with me all she liked. I don't care anymore. Instead, she hugged me again.
That's so sweet of you. I love how much you care about me and Desmond, boss. You're amazing. Well, I am still a little sad that I can't finish working on my baby quite yet, but it would all be for naught if my darling caught a shell, so I think you're right. Thank you very much.
This again. Okay. She relaxed her grip on me and backed away. Her demeanor shifted once more. It was as if her heart had sunk from her head back into her chest, and her brain was once more in control.
Sorry, boss. It seems I lost my composure once again. I bet you don't like seeing me so vulnerable. I just get a little emotional from time to time. I'm sorry. I'll control myself better in the future.
I didn't even know how to respond to that. It's all right, I began tentatively. You don't have to hide a thing from me. You're strange, but you're as human as me, so don't be afraid to show that. She lunged at me and wrapped her arms around my waist. Before I knew it, I was airborne, Lucy holding me tightly in her arms. Her strength shocked me, but I was getting used to her enthusiasm. I patted her head gently, and she set me down. Well, that's quite a grip you've got there, Goldstein. I'm glad you've taken such a liking to me, I whispered into her ear. It was about all I could do after how tightly she squeezed me. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about her. She was a bizarre creature, but certainly well-intentioned. It would be nice to have her as a contact. Still, I didn't want to get too close. She was nice, but she and that little mold project were a package deal, and I could barely stand being on the same boat as that thing. It hadn't caused any problems since that fateful night, sure, but it's unnatural. My grandfather always told me, Sonny, there's a lot of things in this world that we don't understand. It's good that we have the opportunity to learn from some of those things, but we all end up faced with situations that we just don't understand. When you're faced with something like that, ignore your thoughts and trust your instincts. Deep in your mind lies the accumulated knowledge of every single human being who came before you, and when your own mind ain't good enough, that subliminal perception can save your life. He was a very wise man, well-read and learned, and he did his best to pass that wisdom along to me. If I were more certain of myself, I might pursue Goldstein, try to understand her better. That was, after all, my calling, to understand the unknown and banish meaningless fear. Still, I was only a man, and there was only so much my nature would permit me to do. The rolling tides and alien creatures of the depths I could handle, but Lucy Goldstein's heart would forever remain a mystery to me. We made good progress for a few days. Navigation was impossible without the sun, so we considered our expedition over and headed east for American shores. We all agreed that we wouldn't mention the Russians, just that our navigational equipment was destroyed in a freak accident. I felt my sleep grow restless, though I wasn't sure if it was just my general unease with Goldstein and the Russians, or some external influence. The only reason I had even begun to consider the latter is that I began to have that dream about the red light more often. It was the same every time a red light shone through my window. I felt the drop, and everything was fine again. I was always too scared to look out the window and see what the light was, so I couldn't know any more details on what caused my dreams until I figured that out. The others seemed to be growing more tired as we carried on, but I wasn't surprised. After what we had been made to endure, that much was to be expected. We got to the point where we rarely worked. It was hard to count the days anymore. Our time was spent playing cards out on a deck, and passing off the responsibility of the helm to whoever felt up for it. A week passed, and it seemed as if we were no closer to our home than when the Russians first intercepted us. Something had to be done tonight. That night I had the dream again. The crimson tide of blood poured through my window, and I was once again a mere effort away from finding out just what was bleeding. I would not run this time. I refused to be cowed by this sensation for another second. With a quick burst of energy, I shattered the illusion of impotence which had overcome me every time before and sat up in my bed. With the delusion broken, I pinned my face to my window, scanning everything for the source of the red light. The moon was a brilliant crimson and shone with more light than the sun. The light at once compelled me and repulsed me. It was beautiful in every sense of the word, but it overloaded every sense in my body. I began to grow nauseous and almost threw up. As I looked down for a bucket or something of the like, I saw something I truly wasn't prepared for. There was a sea below us, sure, but it was a sea of clouds. As the shock forced last night's dinner from my gut, a singular thought ran through my head. Get the others. Lucy Goldstein! Samuel Desmond! Get out here now! I bellowed through waves of bile. I staggered out of my quarters and saw both of them, looking sleepy. Trying to speak, I felt only another flood of vomit rushing up, so I shut my mouth and staggered into the cabin. They followed, and both absolutely broke upon seeing the truth of things. I couldn't stick around to gauge their reactions, though. With a swift kick, I forced the door open and ran to the deck, relieving myself over the side. As I did, I saw one of the orange bands of light come down toward me. I ducked and watched as it soared overhead. The blinding beam cut through the rail I was leaning on 2 seconds ago cleanly, slicing it off of the ship in the instant. Still, the scrap metal didn't fall away. Instead, it floated up toward that accursed moon. What happened to gravity? Everything has its own gravitational field, true, but the moon's gravity only overcomes Earth's pull when... Oh no, we are currently closer to the moon than the Earth. I racked my brain but couldn't find any explanation as to how. Just then I saw the last thing I would have expected. The Russian warship floated past us through the air, upside down. The Russians? That makes no sense. We've been heading east for a full week, Desmond noted. Another surprise came, as quickly as all the others. I started to feel as if the boat was sinking. Every memory of that sudden drop from my dreams came flooding back, and I rushed into the cabin. Both of you, to the mattresses! Goldstein, holding a camera, followed me closely. Desmond came rushing after us. It was as if we acted as one. Each of us went to our bedroom and clung to our beds, bracing for impact. It was just as violent and disorienting as I had expected. If not for the padding, we would surely have been dashed to pieces, or impaled. Sound off, ladies, I called, hoping that both of them had survived.
Yes, boss.
Good, Lucy was safe. Takes a little more than that to kill me, Desmond called. Perfect, no casualties. We all gathered in the cabin. The moon was white again, and the sky was clear. The Russian ship floated on the horizon, silent and inactive. So, what do we do now? Desmond asked, now that we're all on the same page. I had already been considering this. Let's consider what we know. We're in the same relative vicinity as the Russians. They might be able to provide aid or pose a threat if we go over there. However, their ship was flying as well, so we shouldn't have to explain anything to them. They're secondary when faced with the main threat, the moon. Something's different about it, something that messes with the effects of gravity and light. It's discombobulating, but if we stick around much longer, it will likely prove lethal. We also don't know the range of its effects, or whether or not we could escape it. Lastly, you had a camera, Goldstein. Knowing you took a lot of pictures of what happened. If we can get those to America or Russia, we could save a lot of people, maybe even ourselves. I don't know what condition our ship or the Russian ship is in, but we can run a brief inspection to see whether or not either can make that trip. That is our data. Now how do we go about this experiment? Desmond seemed to appreciate my clarification, as he somewhat enthusiastically chimed with a counterpoint. The moon's a problem for both sides. We test weapons, have a little saber-rattling, but nothing on this scale. The Russians probably understand this, so it makes the most sense to go over there and try talking it out with them. Worst comes to it, they're all dead and we take their ship. A counterattack is much more likely to succeed in that beast. I was stunned. I admit I wanted to go over there as well, but I hadn't even considered striking back. It was certainly an intriguing idea.
I don't know. That moon really scared me,
Goldstein said, all illusions of a careless woman stripped away. Her voice quaked, and she could barely look us in the eye.
If it's all right with you, I'd like to lighten the load on this boat and gun it back to the shore. I don't care what shore, I just want to run. Maybe if I get my camera to the authorities, they can deal with the moon.
She also had a good point. Still, we hadn't included any Russian survivors, so we should try to get them in on this. Let's meet with the Russians before we decide what to do. They probably have their own plan, I stated, ideas circling my own mind. They both nodded, and we set off for the Russian ship. We arrived, but nobody came and greeted us. I tried shouting up to anyone there, but there was no response. Just as I started to reformulate my plans, Captain Alexei finally showed up. Most of him, anyway. His right arm was a disfigured, bandaged mess that ended shortly after his shoulder. Clearly, things were even worse on his ship. He threw down the rope ladder and beckoned us with his remaining hand. The three of us boarded his ship, and were instantly horrified. Blood stains covered the deck, along with other unidentifiable viscera. He seemed to be in high spirits, though I suspect whatever happened here must have broken him to some degree. Welcome aboard, Americans. I thought you might come back. How about that moon? Before you ask, everyone died. I only survived because the bodies of my men stopped my fall. They were such good men. So, what now? I explained the situation, and after an hour's debate, we came to a solid conclusion. We would take any unnecessary supplies on our fishing boat and throw them overboard. Then, Goldstein would race off in it with her camera and a few days' provisions to try and reach Russian shores, since that was the closest landmass. Captain Alexei, Desmond, and I would stay on the destroyer and try to attack the Red Moon next time it pulled us up. We would use the ship's main gun to tear up the surface, then fire a missile to shatter the weak point created by the gunfire. Captain Alexei himself doubted that it would have much effect, but he told us that it was the most we could do with such few people. It would have to do. We were out of options. Sending Goldstein on her way was a quick matter, though a strenuous one. Most of our gear was heavy, and it even took Captain Alexei's aid to digital. Goldstein even let go of her orange mold, which relieved me and saddened me at once.
I probably won't be able to work on it again, she had said, but maybe sacrificing it will give it another chance at life, if I actually made it.
I wanted to cry, but no tears came to me. Instead, I just wrapped my arms around her in one final embrace. Farewell, Lucy. It was sappy, especially for me, but there was no reason to hold back anymore. The rest of our day was spent training with Captain Alexei. We were quick studies, but learning how to actually fire the ship's weapons was at once thrilling and terrifying. Command of such firepower felt like more responsibility than Desmond and I could handle. We studied diligently, though, knowing what would happen if we failed. Desmond was in command of the main gun, since he was the strongest at the moment. I would fire the missile. Captain Alexei manned the radio to coordinate our attacks. We also had set up mattresses for the next fall. Worst came to it, we all had pistols taken from the bodies of dead soldiers. Before we knew it, night was falling. We were all waiting at our posts for the red moon to rise. The sky was clear, so we watched the sun set and the white moon rise with intense fixation. Once the sun was gone, I felt that same familiar nausea as my nerves twisted and synapses burned. A flourish of light, and the crimson moon reared its ugly head once more, as if eager for this showdown. Just like that, we were flying. The world seemed to fall farther away with exponentially compounding speed as we shot off into the heavens. The moon beat back at us with that mind-bending aversion, but the beautiful, powerful ship cut right through. Desmond aimed the gun according to Captain Alexei's orders. He lived for duty, so he had taken it upon himself to master the art of quickly reloading. His skill was on full display now, as he unleashed the storm of fire, pounding the moon's surface with countless shells as we drew closer and closer.
I'm running low on munitions,
he spoke over the radio, his composure unbroken. After a couple more shots, the gun went silent. To my surprise, the surface of the moon began to react. Chunks of it fell away, like the shell of an egg. In fact, it seemed as if the moon itself was hatching. Crimson rock crumbled to clouds of dust overhead, revealing the thick, viscous yolk and the embryo inside. Various horrific fluids rained down, but we were safe inside the ship's cabin. The embryo was the true menace. It appeared orange and fluffy, like Goldstein's pet mold, only perverted intensely to a degree that no righteous woman of science would allow. It was exponentially bigger than anything on our ship, than anything I had ever seen. Terrible ribbons of light circled it frantically. With a sickening shriek, it began to shift around, rolling and coiling and writhing and slithering, until it had taken the form of a perfect, statuesque angel. No! It couldn't be. Was this God? Am I in the wrong here? Am I evil? Any personal doubts of my own were quickly dispelled when I heard Desmond's voice over the radio.
I see it now. It's beautiful. The holy light of the dog shall grant us all true salvation. We shall all become one with the dog, for that is the fate of all with a trace of law and order in their fragile souls. Let our flesh merge and our minds fuse, as canine horns herald in the coming of a new age. Apotheosis is upon us all. Now become God, become dog. Join me, boss.
His voice held the pure innocence of a deranged cultist. To think that such a stoic man could be corrupted so. The sound of a gunshot echoed out over the radio, and with his death, I came to an epiphany. The angel, a dog, it had shown us each something different to maximize the psychological harm inflicted. No, this wasn't God. Even if it was, it's not a God worth worshipping. No gracious benefactor stood before us, no creator with even the faintest notion of love. This God, if it even was one, wanted to fight and kill until there was nothing left but a starless void. When something declares war on humanity like that, we put it to the sword. "It's time!" Captain Alexei's shout barely resonated over the screaming in my mind, but it was enough for me to slam down my hand on the button in front of me and fire my missile. I watched the projectile soar toward the beast, only for a ribbon to flick out and slice it in two, causing it to explode harmlessly away from the fleshy pulp. My hopes were instantly dashed, and I looked over at Captain Alexei. He was just staring at the false god, crying. As unnatural sobs choked from his mouth, he walked over to a wall and leaned back with all his might. With a sickening, deafening crunch, he slammed his head into the wall and crumbled. Blood and brain matter flowed out onto the ground in equal measure. With that, I resolved that I would not die here. Looking up, I stared the angel right in the eyes. Its austere gaze watched me emotionlessly. "How dare you?" I choked out, refusing to break under the weight of the beast's will. "How dare you look at me? You're just a crusty little mold embryo, can't even hatch right. You've taken my moon, my gravity, my people. Still, you have the raw nerve, the sheer unthinkable audacity to look at me like that? Like you're better than me or something? Do you honestly believe I'll stand for this? Who do you even think I am? I'll die here happily, but I'm going to make you suffer as much as humanly possible on my way out. Screw with my head, will you? We'll see who's insane when this is all over. Now, come to me." My frantic whispers quickly rose to incoherent shouts, but my mind remained clear. I would do everything I can to break this creature, and pray that Goldstein would break through the beast's hold and bring the entire firepower of the world down on this creature. Wait. I would pray? Who would I even be praying to? I refuse to pray to some lump of mold. That's it. I'll pray to myself. I'm just as much a god as that laughable thing. How fitting. The clash of two beasts pretending to be gods. The ship was accelerating even faster now, as if the concept of terminal velocity had ceased to exist. I began to panic. Soft, and squishy. Mattress! I ran to a mattress and hunkered down. I was just in time. The ship slammed violently into the flesh of the beast, throwing Captain Alexei's body through the glass of the windows and out into the mold. I shuddered to think that I might have joined him if I were any slower. With the impact over, I made my way outside through the hole in the glass. It scratched me up a little, but I was just happy that I could still feel anything. The boat had pierced the flesh of the beast, but the blade wasn't enough to kill it. I shouted in frustration, then bit back any further outbursts. I would need every ounce of my strength for what was to follow. Over the next few days, I shot the baby with every weapon on board the ship. I ate every corpse, including Alexei and Desmond. I punched the ground until my hands shattered and my fingers fell off. I ate those too, bones and all. I then kicked until my feet splintered and my thighs snapped. Whenever I struck it, the orange would turn purple for a few minutes, as if it bruised easily. This was good. I liked hurting it. I was excited in ways I hadn't even imagined at the thought that I could gently tickle the beast's cute little pain receptors. Of course, My excitement faded when I realized what final weapon I was left with. I drew back as much as I could, taking a position similar to Captain Alexei's last act. Then, I slammed my head into the ground. It hurt more than anything I had ever experienced. I had a moment of clarity. I'm a scientist. My brain is the one truly precious thing I have. I can't throw that away. Just then, the slick, squirming, slipping thoughts came back. "Break from me!" I yelled, going in for another vicious headbutt. "Just die!" And another, "Please!" And another. With each one, I felt a little of myself fading. But I couldn't stop now. I couldn't go back. Another slam, another thud, another crunch. Another part of my body rendered paste and powder. My resolve broke before my skull did. I rolled over and looked at the sky one last time. Countless bright lights on the horizon. The few functioning neurons in my head got to work. Missiles. A joint attack. Enough military might to kill a god 1,000 times over. Very good. She did it. A final word. A requiem, even. A last will and testament. Lucy. Hello, everyone. Johnny Doberman here, and today I've got a fun little story for you. So, a lot of these short horror stories I write off of nightmares that I have, and this one was particularly interesting, because rather than just write it all out in the morning, I actually wondered to myself, what Cold War era Russian destroyer would be best at shooting up the moon? So, after browsing several Wikipedia articles at good old 5 a.m., my favorite time of day, I found out that it would actually be the Kotland-class destroyer, specifically the kind that were modified to carry SAMs, or surface-to-air missiles, like the Skromny or the Nastoychevy. And also, it's okay to admit it, because I already know. I got you real good, didn't I? All those tentacles in the video, all them hands reaching up from below, and the real scary thing isn't even in the ocean. Oh, that was fun. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one. Bye.